Hello guys, you are welcome to another lecture on public financial management. Today we shall be looking at the topic fiscal and monetary policy of government. The topic focuses on explanation of the key policy instruments the government adopts in order to achieve its macroeconomic goal. Generally, the macroeconomic goal of any government include the attainment of full employment, attainment of full potential output, price stability, accelerated and stable economic growth, and the attainment of full favorable balance of payment. In attempting to achieve these goals, the government employed the instrument of the fiscal and monetary policy. These policies are normally referred to as macroeconomic policy, and their main focus is to direct the economy towards the attainment of the stated macroeconomic goal. So at the end of this lecture, the student should be able to define the concept of fiscal policy and monetary policy, identify the key objective of the policies, discuss the major instruments of both policies, and explain some provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. So I want to welcome you. Thank you very much. So now let us start with the concept of fiscal policy. What is fiscal policy? The fiscal policy is the use of government spending and taxation policy to influence economic conditions, especially macroeconomic conditions, which include aggregate demand for goods and services, employment, inflation, and the redistribution of income and wealth. Macroeconomic policy is actually the use of the powers of taxation, public expenditure, and other financial programs contained in the annual budget by the government to achieve the said objective. So the macroeconomic policy actually focus on the use of government powers, fiscal powers, which involve taxation, which is the revenue side, and government spendings to influence key economic aggregate. And the major objective is to achieve the macroeconomic goal, which we have already stated. So the fiscal policy is based on John Maynard Keynes' idea that government can stabilize business cycle and regulate economic output by adjusting its spending and taxing policies. So this is a negation of the classical doctrine of the laissez-faire, where government will just play a supportive role. In that case, the price system actually allocates resources and determine price and all other things in the economy. But with the Great Depression and the Keynesian Revolution, the fiscal policy tool was formulated, and it is aimed at achieving macroeconomic goals. Now, what are the objectives of fiscal policy? The objective of fiscal policy actually varies between the developed world and the underdeveloped economy. So the objective is a bit narrower for the developed world compared to the developing countries. So we're going to look at them from the perspective of the developed economy and also from the underdeveloped world. In the developed world, the key objective of the fiscal policy include the following. One, to attain full employment. Full employment here is talking about human labor, capital. So the key objective, one of the major objectives of the fiscal policy is how to manipulate the economy towards attaining full employment. In other words, reducing unemployment to a tolerable level, because it's actually impossible to have zero unemployment. Then number two is the attainment of economic stability. Economic stability here simply refers to the absence of excessive fluctuation in macroeconomy. So the fiscal policy promotes economic stability in the face of short-run international cyclical fluctuations. This can involve the use of the tariff policy. Then the last one here is to stabilize the rate of economic growth. The aim here is to achieve a stable economic growth over time. So these are the key policy objectives of the fiscal policy in the advanced country. Now let us look at the objective of fiscal policy in relation to the developing countries. Like I said, it is broader. Here, the fiscal policy objective in these developed countries include the attainment of full employment, which is reducing unemployment to a very low level, price stability, that is absence of inflation or reducing inflation to a low level, economic stability, which is number 3. Like I said, this is the absence of excessive fluctuation in the macroeconomy. Here, the fiscal policy is used to actually try to insulate the economy from excessive fluctuation from the international world. Then number 4, high capital formation and investment. Investment actually is one of the variables that moves the economy. So fiscal policy is actually one of the instruments, one of its objectives is to see how investment can actually be attracted. Then number 5, the attainment of optimal allocation of resources. Resources should be optimally allocated to more productive sectors of the economy. Then number 6, attainment of equitable distribution of income and wealth. Here we're talking about reducing the income inequality. A wide income gap actually breeds resentment, it breeds insecurity. So in a society where there is wide income gap, the rich are afraid to sleep, the poor are afraid to sleep. The poor will not sleep because it's hungry, while the rich will not sleep because the poor is awake. So everybody is awake. So another objective there is the attainment of full potential output, which is the full utilization of all non-human labor resources. And lastly, the attainment of economic growth. Now, what are the major instruments of the fiscal policy? Instrument here refers to the tools employed by the government in carrying out their fiscal policy actions. The major instruments of the fiscal policy include the following. 1, the annual budget. The budget is an instrument which is used to manipulate the economy towards the desired direction. Then 2, taxation. Taxation here are levies on individuals and corporate entities in a society. Taxation here can be as an anti-depression measure or anti-inflationary measure. So in both ways, they can be used as a tool for fiscal actions of government. Then public expenditure. This is the spendings of government. The spendings of government can be used as a tool to also fine-tune the direction of the economy. Then another instrument is the public works. The public works here refers to the actions of government, particularly during the Depression era. It is used as an anti-depression policy. Here we are talking about expenditure of government on roads, schools, etc. So they can also be used. It's also an instrument of the fiscal policy. And lastly, public debt. This is the borrowing of government. This is a sound fiscal weapon to fight against inflation and recession. It brings about economic stability and full employment. So government borrowing can be used as a tool. So it's one of the tools, the key tool the government also used in their fiscal policy actions. So types of fiscal policy. Basically, there are 2 types of fiscal policy. These are the expansionary fiscal policy and the contractionary fiscal policy. The expansionary fiscal policy, which is also called the loose fiscal policy, is used mainly to stimulate economic activities or to stimulate economic growth. It involves expanding government expenditure and reducing tax. So it's taken from the word expand, which means we are trying to expand the economy, and as such, it involves pumping in more resources, more money into the economy. The other one is the contractionary fiscal policy, which we call the tight fiscal policy. This is mainly used during a time of economic prosperity. It is actually used to try to streamline excessive expansion of economic activities. It involves increase in tax and reduction in public expenditure. So the type of fiscal policy to be adopted depends on the period the economy is. During the inflationary period, the contractionary fiscal policy is adopted. Whereas if the economy is in recession or depression, then there is need to stimulate the economy. Hence, the expansionary fiscal policy is adopted. So if any of these policies is misguided, for example, if the economy is in inflationary period and you are using expansionary fiscal policy, you discover that inflation will go hyper. So we have to be careful to understand the nature of the time that is prevailing, and then we can adopt the type of fiscal policy that is appropriate. Now, in order to be able to manage government spendings appropriately, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2008 was enacted. And the aim of this act was to provide for prudent management of the nation's resources. 2, to ensure long-term macroeconomic stability of the economy. 3, to secure greater accountability and transparency in fiscal operations within a medium-term fiscal policy framework. And 4, to establish the Fiscal Responsibility Commission to ensure the promotion and enforcement of the nation's economic objective. So this act was established purposely to guide key actors in the government sectors in the management of the resources. As we are aware, the aim of public financial management is to ensure efficiency in the utilization of the country's resources. So to guide the key actors who are in charge of these functions of dispensing government fund, there have to be a law. So the legal framework guiding their fiscal action is the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It has been reviewed, but it was originally enacted in 2007. Now, one of the aims of the Fiscal Responsibility Act was to establish the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. So the Act established the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and some powers were conferred on this commission. These powers include: 1, to compel any person or government institution or agency to disclose information regarding public revenue in their domain. And secondly, cause an investigation into whether any person in public office has violated any provision or provisions of this act. If such is established, that is, if person is found culpable, if person has been discovered to have violated any of the provisions of this Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Commission has the power to forward a report of investigation to the Attorney Generals or the Federation for possible prosecution. So the Fiscal Responsibility Commission is actually responsible for the implementation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. That means they are responsible for guiding all government agencies, all key actors in the government sector in terms of their fiscal actions, in terms of their fiscal responsibility at any point in time. It's actually a watchdog in the economy to watch how money is being dispensed, whether they follow normal procedure or not. Now, what are the functions of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission? Their functions are well contained in Section 3, subsection 1 of the Act. And this section states that the function include 1, to monitor and enforce the provisions of the Act and hence promote the economic objective of the country as contained in Section 16 of the nation's constitution. Then number 2, they are to undertake fiscal and financial studies, fiscal and financial investigation, research, analysis, and diagnosis, and disseminate the results, their findings, to members of the public. This is to enhance efficiency. Then 3, to disseminate such standard practice, including global best practice that will result in greater efficiency in the allocation and management of the country's scarce resources. Then number 3, make rules for carrying out its own functions under the Act. And lastly, which is number 5, is to perform any other functions consistent with the promotion of the objective of the Act as may be assigned from time to time. So you can see that the Fiscal Commission is a robust body in terms of fiscal policy in Nigeria. Now let us examine the expenditure side of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. This has to do with expenditure ceiling. The Act in section 12, subsection 1 and 2, set expenditure ceiling for the economy. According to that section, aggregate expenditure, an amount appropriated by the National Assembly of each financial year, shall not be more than the estimated aggregate revenue, that is a balanced budget, plus a deficit not exceeding 3% of the estimated GDP, gross domestic product, or any sustainable percentage as may be determined by the National Assembly. This aspect is the powers of the National Assembly. Then 2, aggregate expenditure of a financial year may exceed the ceiling imposed in subsection 1 of this section, above if the opinion of the President there is a clear and present or persistent threat to national security or sovereignty of the country. This is actually saying that although a ceiling has been set, but if the opinion of the President there is a need to exceed this particular ceiling, particularly when it has to do with national security and sovereignty of the country, the Act gives the power to the President to exceed this particular ceiling at any particular point in time. But it must also always recourse back to the National Assembly. So having looked at the expenditure ceiling, which is the expenditure side of government fiscal action, let us now look at the taxation aspect, restriction on grant of tax relief. You know, the government have powers to give tax relief when the need arises, but this Act is placing some restriction on the grant of such relief. And this is contained in section 29, subsection 1 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. And it says that any proposed tax expenditure, here tax expenditure means tax relief, shall be accompanied by an evaluation of its budget and evaluation of its budget and financial implications in the year it to become effective and in the subsequent 3 years, which is the medium term. And 2, it shall only be approved by the minister on just 2 conditions. 1, this granting of tax relief does not adversely impair the revenue estimates of the annual budget. If it impaired the revenue base or the revenue estimate of the annual budget, then it should not be approved. And secondly, such request should be accompanied by a countervailing measure in the period. So what are the other ways you are going to use to raise revenue to counter the adverse effects of this tax relief given to a particular unit or agents of the economy? So if there are no countervailing measures, other measures put in place to insulate the budget from being impaired, then it cannot be approved. Now, let us pause for a while and assess what we have done. So there are some class assessment exercises which you can ponder upon here. One is, what is fiscal policy? Briefly explain the objectives of fiscal policy and briefly explain the instruments of fiscal policy. Having discussed the fiscal policy, let us turn our attention now to the other instrument, which is the monetary policy. So the first thing is to look at the concept. What is monetary policy? Monetary policy is any conscious or deliberate actions of the monetary authority or the central bank to control the quantity, availability, or cost of money in an economy. It is a combination of policy measures designed by a central bank or the broader monetary authority to control the quantity of money and cost of credit in an economy. So on the whole, the monetary policy is actually the process by which the central bank controls the supply, the availability, and the cost of money in order to achieve some stated or predetermined macroeconomic goal. So monetary policy is an instrument in the hand of the monetary authority to try to regulate the total money in circulation, the quantity of money in circulation, how it flows, the cost of such money at a particular point in time. As we are aware, where there is too much money in circulation, there is a problem. And where there is too little, there is also a problem. So the monetary policy is used as an instrument to regulate the quantum of money in circulation at every particular point in time in an economy. So like we did for the case of the fiscal policy, now let us also look at the goal or the target of monetary policy. The basic goal of the monetary policy is actually the attainment of the country's macroeconomic objectives. And the macroeconomic objectives of a country globally include the following. 1, low unemployment. 2, high output growth rate. 3, low inflation rate. And 4, stable exchange rate. So this goal are referred to as macroeconomic goal or macroeconomic objective. And these are the goal that every country wishes to achieve at a particular point in time. Although you are going to find cases of antagonistic goal and complementary goal, which we may not go into in this particular class. However, given all the goal, price stability has become one of the most, or has become the most prominent of all the objectives. So most central banks in the world has focused their attention on the attainment of price stability. Hence, price stability has become the core mandate of the central bank of Nigeria. So the core goal of the monetary policy in Nigeria is the attainment of price stability vis-a-vis other goals as stated above. So what are the key instruments of the monetary policy? When we say instrument here, we're talking about the tools used to achieve the goal of the monetary policy. In Nigeria, the following are the key instruments, policy tool of the monetary policy. One, the bank rate. It is also called the monetary policy rate or the discount rate, which has to do with the rate at which the central bank gives money to the deposit money bank as a lender of last resort. Then number two, open market operation, which is the trading of government securities in the open market, treasury bills, bonds, stock, and others in the open market. So that is also under instrument. Then we also have the reserve requirement, which are requirements laid down by the monetary guideline to all the deposit money banks and all financial institutions to adhere to. They are the minimum requirement required of them at any particular point in time. So we also have the selective control. This is also called the credit control. It's an instrument used to selectively allocate resources, loan credit, to some favored or productive section of the economy. And the last instrument here is moral suasion. The moral suasion here simply means advice from the central bank to the deposit money bank to follow in order to achieve the stated objective. Now let us look at the monetary policy strategies. When we talk of monetary policy strategies, we are talking about the techniques adopted by the central bank to achieve their goals. It involves choosing a goal or an intermediate variable and setting targets on such variables. So when the central bank want to actually carry out their function, they tend to choose some goals as their main focus. So we call them target goal, or at times they can choose some intermediate instrument like interest rate, money supply as a target variable. With this target variable, they'll be able to attack and get what they actually want. So these goals and intermediate variable normally selected include one, monetary targeting, that's monetary policy rate, interest rate targeting, the nominal GDP targeting, the exchange rate targeting, inflation targeting, and the price level targeting. If you go through the monetary policy guideline in Nigeria, you discover that since we are focusing more on inflation, we have an inflation target of 7%. So that is the target that the country wishes to attain at a particular point in time. So far, though, we are seeing double-digit inflation, but the target is actually 7% inflation rate. So these variables are used as a measure to gauge the economy. So let us pause again and take a look at the following class assessment exercise. Questions are three there. What is monetary policy? That's the definition. What are the key objectives of the monetary policy? Explain the various instruments adopted by CBN to achieve their goal. So far, we have looked at various aspects of the fiscal and monetary policy. We looked at the definition, of the fiscal policy as well as that of the monetary policy. We looked at their key policy objectives. We looked at their instruments of fiscal policy, instruments of monetary policy. We also looked at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, various provisions as regard expenditure ceiling, as regard the granting of tax relief. We also looked at the monetary policy strategies. So I hope we have been able to enjoy this lecture. So I will leave you with this little class marked assignment, which I expect you to do and submit before the next class. Questions are 3 there. Fiscal policy is said to be based on the theories of British economist John Maynard Keynes discussed. Explain the role of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission in ensuring prudent spending of public funds. And 3, explain the types of fiscal and monetary policy measures the government can adopt during economic recession. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening. Till I come your way next time, have a blessed day.